Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. She said her mother was a general. They laughed. Until she arrived. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in Huntsville, Virginia, a city both understated and strategic, shaped by military history and patriotic traditions. Around the city, pine trees stood their dark silhouettes, like silent sentinels watching over generations of soldiers past and present. The streets, quiet at this hour, still carried the cool of the night, while the sun began to gently warm the red brick facades and neatly lined white picket fences. In the affluent residential neighborhood of Oak Ridge Hill, where every house seemed to have stepped out of a catalogue of perfection, lawns were mowed with military precision. American flags flew proudly on porches, as if to remind any passerby that here, order, success, and national belonging were not just ideas, but social obligations. 16-year-old Maya Thompson strolled along the sidewalk. She carried her slightly worn backpack, and her slightly oversized army cap, a gift from her mother, partially concealed her long, carefully knotted braids. The headphones in her ears played a playlist that blended conscious rap and modern jazz, an intimate soundtrack that helped her clear her head. That walk between the base and the high school was one of the rare moments of the day when Maya felt truly herself. Alone. Invisible. Away from the gaze of others, from the weight of expectations. She loved the regularity of her steps, the feel of the fresh morning air on her face, the crunch of leaves beneath her sneakers. It was her routine, her refuge. She lived with her mother on the Fort Davis military base, in a discreet but strictly guarded house. Their daily routine was as smooth as clockwork: wake up at 5:30 a.m., silence at 10 p.m., no surprises. Life with General Ava M. Thompson, her mother, imposed a discipline that she had absorbed very early on. But beyond the uniform, Maya harbored a deep, almost sacred admiration for her mother. This 49-year-old black woman, as straight as an oak, decorated with medals and honors, commanded respect in every room she entered, whether it was the Pentagon or a base abroad. But outside the well-guarded gates of Fort Davis, the name Thompson meant nothing to her. Out there, on the streets of Oak Ridge Hill, she wasn't the general's daughter. She was just a black girl. A lone figure in a neighborhood where stares were heavy with suspicion and smiles rare. Out there, people didn't ask her who her mother was, they asked her what she was doing there. She knew it. She felt it. The curious glances that slipped behind the curtains. The morning joggers who slowed down as she approached. The passers-by who edged slightly around her. In Oak Ridge Hill, everything was beautiful, clean, rich, and white. And Maya, even with her calm demeanor, even with her impeccable manners, even with her cap that said, U.S. Army, didn't belong in that postcard image. But she kept moving forward. Because her mother had taught her never to walk with her head down. To always look straight ahead. Because in her pocket, she had the picture of herself as a child, in the arms of Ava Thompson in fatigues. And that picture, more than all the medals in the world, reminded her of who she was. As she approached Mason Ridge Avenue, Maya felt, more than saw, the atmosphere change. It was one of those corners of the neighborhood where the hedges were so neatly trimmed that you'd think a secret competition took place there every month. The sidewalk was so clean that she would have hesitated to drop a crumb on it. That's when she saw, about 30 meters away, a police car parked at an angle on the shoulder. Engine still purring. Lights off. 2 white police officers, one tall and bald, the other stockier, leaned casually against the door, talking in low voices while scanning the surroundings. Maya, absorbed by the music, tried to continue on her way as if nothing had happened. She kept her gaze straight, as her mother had taught her, not to show fear, not to attract attention. But as she passed by them, she felt a heavy silence fall, then a loud, dry voice cracked through the air. Hey! You over there! Wait a second. She jumped. Slowly removed her headphones. Turned around, puzzled. Me? The bald police officer, Officer Reynolds, had already straightened up. He was walking forward with a confident, authoritative stride, his thumbs hooked into his belt. "What are you doing in this neighborhood? Do you live here?" The question, even asked without apparent insult, oozed suspicion. Maya felt an old tension settle in her chest. She straightened slightly, instinctively, but her heart sped up. "I'm going to school, sir. Kennedy High School. I pass by there every morning." She spoke calmly, almost too calmly. Because she knew that the slightest hint of irritation would be interpreted as arrogance or insolence. "Do you have any ID?" Reynolds asked, without taking his eyes off her. She sighed softly. She knew. She'd read the articles, seen the videos, heard the stories her mother called the realities on the ground. She'd heard about Tamir, Sandra, Elijah. She'd heard the tense silences in adult conversations, seen her mother frown at each new name that became a hashtag. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared her for this moment. Not at 16. Not with just a backpack on her back. She swallowed. "No, sir. But you can call Fort Davis. I'm Maya Thompson, General Thompson's daughter." There was a blank, a fluttering in the air. As if time had stood still. Then the second policeman, Officer Dwyer, snorted loudly. "From General Thompson? A 4-star general?" Reynolds adds with a smirk. "Stop your drama." He glanced at his colleague, as if to say, "Is she serious? You want us to believe that a black teenager with a crooked cap is the daughter of a 4-star general?" His tone had changed. It was no longer astonishment. It was contempt, wrapped in humiliation. "Come on, sit on the sidewalk." Maya took a step back in shock. "I didn't do anything." Reynolds approached abruptly, shoulders square, left hand already near his belt. Resistance to authority now? She felt her breath quicken. Her throat tighten. But she fixed her eyes on the man's. "My mother is General Ava M. Thompson. Call the base. Ask for Colonel Miller, or Sergeant Collins. They'll confirm it. I'm not lying to you." An icy silence fell again. Dwyer wasn't laughing this time. He had blanched slightly. He knew that name. Or thought he'd heard it before. But Reynolds stayed on the line. He sneered, more coldly. "There isn't even a black female 4-star general in this region. Stop your madness. You might have seen this on a Netflix series." He took out his handcuffs slowly, without shouting, like one takes out a well-oiled routine. "We'll take you to the station. You'll explain everything there." Maya stepped back again, her hands shaking. An old woman was watering her flowers a few houses away. A jogger slowed briefly but resumed running. No one intervened. She thought of her mother. Of her boots, always well polished. Of her words, "You're a Thompson. You keep your head up, even when it's pushed down." So, even though her legs were weakening, Maya remained standing. And somewhere, at the very end of the street, an engine was approaching, accompanied by a noise heavier than the others. It was at that precise moment, as Reynolds prepared to place the handcuffs on Maya's trembling wrists, that a dull, heavy roar broke the silence of the neighborhood. An unusual noise, deeper than a simple civilian car engine. A sound laden with authority. All eyes turned. An imposing black armored car sped around the corner of Mason Ridge Avenue. It bore the gold insignia of Fort Davis, gleaming in the morning rays. The vehicle braked sharply, its tires squealing on the smooth asphalt like a sharp warning. Even before the engine had turned off, 2 uniformed military security officers stepped out of the vehicle with precision and determination. Their movements were sharp and practiced. They circled the car and opened the rear door with a controlled gesture. And then she appeared. General Ava M. Thompson. A tall, straight black woman, sculpted by years of discipline, combat, and restrained silence. Her impeccably tailored uniform reflected a build of authority, and her chest bore the highest decorations of the American military: Distinguished Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Defense Superior Service Medal. On his shoulders shone 4 stars. the top of the military hierarchy. But it wasn't the stars or the medals that commanded immediate respect, it was her gaze. A sharp, cold, piercing gaze that would have made an ill-prepared colonel recoil. She strode toward the stage, her back straight, her face impassive, like a general entering a theater of operations in hostile territory. The two police officers froze. No words. Even the wind seemed to have died down. She stopped barely 2 meters from Reynolds, took a quick look at her daughter, trembling, but standing, then turned her icy attention back to the officers. Her voice burst forth, calm and sharp as a steel blade. "Officers, step back from my daughter immediately. That is an order." Reynolds, stunned, took 2 steps back. His face fell. His hands, still near the handcuffs, froze. Madam. General. We didn't know." But he didn't finish his sentence. For General Thompson, without raising her voice, took another step forward. She took out her official military badge, held it out with chilling calm, and placed it a few inches from Reynolds's pale face. Her words were measured, controlled, but each one resonated like a hammer blow. "You arrested a minor without reason. You refused to check her identity. You laughed in her face when she calmly told you the truth. And why? Because her skin color didn't match your idea of what a general's daughter looks like." A silence fell, heavier than ever. Reynolds was lost for words. Dwyer, however, had looked away, ashamed, his lips pressed together. The general raised 2 fingers. One of the military agents accompanying him, a stiff-looking sergeant, immediately approached. He pulled out a secure tablet and asked for the 2 officers' personnel numbers, names, and badge numbers. There was no refusal, not a word. Reynolds obeyed, now smaller than life. "You'll hear from me. And from the Department of Defense." Then, in a gesture both maternal and powerful, Ava placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. A warm, protective hand. A hand that said, "I'm here now. You don't have to carry this weight alone anymore." Maya, tears welling up in her eyes, nodded slowly. The general turned her head slightly and said, one last time, with measured slowness, "Remember this day, gentlemen. Because your prejudices have confronted you with something you never thought possible, the power and the skin you refuse to respect." Then she led her daughter to the car. The doors slammed shut, and the armored vehicle drove slowly down the quiet street, leaving behind 2 motionless police officers and a silence no uniform could ever again silence. The scene was only supposed to last a few minutes. Just a black girl arrested in a white neighborhood. Another mistake, covered up by vague reports. But that day, a neighbor, James Buckley, a retired history teacher, was watching his street through his living room window. It wasn't the first time he'd seen the police arrest a bad guy, but this time, something in Maya's posture, in the sudden arrival of that armored vehicle, in the otherworldly presence of that woman in uniform, compelled him to pull out his phone and film. The video was posted on X, formerly Twitter, by his 19-year-old granddaughter, who simply added in the caption, "She said her mother was a general." They laughed. Then she arrived. Within 2 hours, the video had surpassed 100,000 views. By noon, it had made its way up and down the East Coast. By midnight, it had more than 12 million views across all platforms. Clips circulated on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, with dramatic edits adding music, slow motion, and subtitles. Reactions were pouring in from everywhere. Small Blue Diamond former military personnel salute General Thompson's dignity. Small Blue Diamond Black mothers thanking Ava for being the voice of all those who cannot be heard. Small Blue Diamond young black girls writing under the hashtag #JeSuiMaya. Small Blue Diamond and even celebrities sharing the video with messages of support. The hashtags #RespectMaya, #General Thompson, #BelieveBlackPeople, and #SheHasArrived went viral within hours. The next morning, national talk shows made it their main topic. On CNN, a heated debate erupted. Why does a black teenage girl need a general to be believed? Good Morning America offered an exclusive interview. Oprah herself called the Pentagon office to invite Ava to speak. The New York Times devoted its front page to the subject. A star among stars, what America still refuses to see. Faced with this media avalanche, the Huntsville Police Department announced the immediate opening of an internal investigation. The police chief gave a clumsy press conference, attempting to defuse the public outrage. Officer Reynolds was suspended effective immediately. Officer Dwyer was placed on administrative leave pending the conclusion of the investigation. But in the midst of the media storm, Maya remained in the background. She wasn't seeking revenge or glory. She simply wanted to return to her teenage life, going to high school, listening to her music, drawing in her secret notebook. She had never wanted to be a symbol. She didn't want to become a face plastered on a cause beyond her control. But America had already made its choice. When she finally agreed, timidly, to an exclusive interview for the show, 60 Minutes, the journalist asked her, with almost maternal gentleness. Maya, did you feel humiliated that day? Maya took a deep breath. She was sitting in a quiet, dimly lit studio. She wore a simple gray sweater, her hair in braids, and her gaze fixed serenely on the camera. No. Not for me. It wasn't me they humiliated. It was my mother's uniform. It was the sacrifices of our ancestors. It was their own conscience they sullied. Not mine. A respectful silence followed her response. The journalist, visibly moved, said nothing for a few seconds. The entire set seemed to hang on the breath of this teenager who, through her dignity, had just held up a brutal and necessary mirror to America. That evening, the video of the interview reached 5 million views in less than 6 hours. And all over the country, in schools, families, barracks, living rooms, people whispered one name with a mixture of respect and shame, Maya. 2 weeks after the Mason Ridge incident, General Ava M. Thompson received an official invitation from the United States Military Academy at West Point, the legendary bastion of America's military elite. It wasn't her first visit there. She herself had studied there 30 years earlier, in a very different climate, but it was the first time she had been asked to speak as a moral figure, as a role model, as a mother. The amphitheater was packed. Nearly 1,200 uniformed cadets, arranged by rank and year, had taken their seats. Members of the High Command were also present, as were representatives from the Ministry of Defense, journalists, veterans, and a dozen high school students invited for the occasion, seated in the front row. Behind the scenes, some whispered that such enthusiasm had not been seen since Colin Powell's visit. Silence fell as soon as she took the stage. She wasn't wearing the classic ceremonial outfit. She had chosen her operational uniform, the one she wore during critical decisions in the field. Her face was grave, but her gaze burned with implacable lucidity. She acknowledged the assembly with a simple nod of her head. She spoke for more than 20 minutes. She recounted her own journey. The silence in the corridors. The skeptical looks in the briefing rooms. The veiled remarks, "Are you sure you're in the right room, Lieutenant?" She spoke of the battles she had fought not only against external enemies, but also against invisible resistance from within. She then spoke of that morning, on an unremarkable residential street, where her daughter had stood up straight in front of 2 officers who saw her as nothing more than a problem to be eliminated. She recounted the call from a panicked subordinate, "General, we have a situation at Mason Ridge. It appears your daughter has been arrested." And she concludes thus. When my daughter told them who she was, they laughed. Because they couldn't conceive that authority could wear her face. That truth could come from her mouth. That legitimacy could reside in her skin. But I have news for you. The future looks like this. He's black. He's proud. He's disciplined. And he's stronger than doubt. He's feminine, often. He's young, sometimes. He doesn't ask permission. He walks straight, even when he's pushed aside. And you are the ones who must welcome him, protect him, and above all not be afraid to serve him. A stunned silence followed his words. Then a standing ovation erupted, brutal, deep, and unmistakable. Not an automatic gesture. A heartfelt outpouring. An applause of respect, of admiration, but also of awakening. Some in the ranks had tears in their eyes. Young recruits, black, brown, Asian, and mixed, who had sometimes wondered if they belonged here, now raised their chins confidently. Others, white and sincere, suddenly understood the extent of the silence that had surrounded them for too long. The Academy's camera was filming. The footage was broadcast nationwide. The speech was shared at military schools, police academies, and universities. It was even added to West Point's leadership training program the following year. And in the days that followed, Maya, watching the video in her room on the base, alone with her headphones, whispered, "Mom, you didn't just speak for me. You spoke for all those who never got to." On that day, the name Thompson entered history. Not just as a rank, not just as a star, but as a living symbol of courage, dignity, and legacy.